Here at X-Rays Podcast, we showcase a series of paintings titled Amerikids by the talented artist Chris Faber Muhammad. As we all know, culture plays a critical key in instilling character, values, and mores into our children. So here we have a few pieces that demonstrate this and exemplify not only entertainment but also education. So if you're interested in any of these paintings, you could contact me in the comments section or on Facebook as Jahad Shakur. All right, welcome back to a new episode of X-Rays Podcast. Today's subject, we're going to tackle the highly controversial subject of the lost tribe of Shabazz. Yes, sir. We plan on going into some of the finer details of the story. Hopefully, we could pull out some of that wisdom, deep wisdom buried into this story. But my name is Jahad Shakur on Facebook. Muhammad Maz, number 25. I'm known as Tavares X. You can reach me on those platforms. Instagram too, Jahad Shakur, even though I hardly be up there. But these are the different platforms that I put this content on. And of course, you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook. I would say open it up, open your browser up in YouTube and subscribe, hit the like button so we can bring you more and more of this type of content, right? We open up real quick in the name of Allah, who appeared in the person of Master Farrakhan Muhammad, to whom praise is forever due. Could never thank him enough for leaving in our midst a divine messenger known as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who we now know as the Exalted Christ. And in his absence, we can never thank him enough for leaving in our midst a guide and a reminder in our brother, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who the world will soon come to know as the long-awaited Messiah. I greet you in the words of peace and paradise in the Arabic language is Assalamu alaikum. All right. Let's delve into this subject. I'll start at the beginning and we'll just push forward as we go. The tribe of Shabazz, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad talks about in a number of publications, right? But in articles over the years, right? So I try to gather as many articles, many books as I can on the subject, because sometimes he'll share detail here or there that might not be in one particular article or publication, right? So the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches that we are the tribe of Shabazz, right? Us, the black people of the planet, or the original people. He says that there were different tribes. There were different tribes on our planet. And this dates back to the trillions of years now, trillions and trillions of years. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that a great cataclysmic event happened on our planet that caused the moon that we see when we look up in the sky every day. That moon happened from an event from a dissatisfied scientist who tried to destroy the population of the earth because he was dissatisfied and frustrated because he couldn't impose his will upon the people. So he exploded the planet, and that's what caused our modern moon. So what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches is that after that explosion happened, that the tribe of Shabazz, right, whom we are a part of, the black people here in the wilderness of North America and others, he said that we covered the entire earth to look for a place to settle. And he said he called us the number one tribe right there, Shabazz, the number one tribe. And he said that we covered the entire earth and we look for a place to settle, and we settled on the best part of the planet, which then was the rich Nile Valley of Africa, continent of Africa, and that expanded all the way to the present holy city of Mecca. So it covered that much area as far as where we settled. And again, this is trillions and trillions of years ago. So he said we were the smartest out of the other tribes that was on the planet. We were the smartest and the wisest amongst them. And, we settled there. And he also said that we are the tribe that writes history for our nation. Right. We write history ahead of time, 25,000 years ahead of time. And we keep this writing hidden in the holy city of Mecca. And this tribe, the number one tribe, we are the record keepers, I would say. And he talked about us being the smartest. And he also said that in this present day and time that we will be made the future rulers due to our long suffering under slavery. He kind of fast forwards the story after that chapter, which I said took place 66 trillion years ago. And he fast forward to 50,000 years ago from this present day. And he said we had a scientist, a dissatisfied scientist that was in the circle of scientists or gods that write this history that lasts for 25,000 years cycles. And then once that cycle ends, another 25,000 year cycle begins, and on and on and on down the wheel of time. So he tells us from this writing that scriptures that we know of today, like the Bible and the Holy Quran, come from this writing, this hidden writing that these scientists have amongst themselves. So he said in the scope of things, there are 12 scientists, 12 major scientists, right? He also mentioned 12 minor, who are the sons of the 12 major. But in this story right here in particular, he focused on the 12. And what he said was a scientist that was amongst them, he wanted to take his people. He said he wanted to make a people that would be strong. They would be like indestructible, and they would get closer to nature and make us tougher to endure anything. And that was his goal. So he said the other 11 scientists disagreed with him. They wasn't in favor of him, going about this adventure or this venture. So they disagreed with him. So they wasn't in favor of doing it. So what they said was, if you make them, you can't make them here in the Holy Land, in the region, the area of Mecca, Arabia, in that area. He wasn't allowed to make the people in that particular region. So he took the people, his people, right, his family. Messenger used the word family times. So he says they went down into the jungles of East Asia. Down into the jungles of East Asia, which is now known as Africa, continent of Africa. And he wanted to get us closer to nature and be able to endure the hot sun, and also to what's the word, to like conquer the beasts of the land there. That was his mission. He said, for whatever reason, he felt it was necessary to for us to go through this and prepare us. The messenger doesn't say exactly what he wanted to prepare us for, but that was in his mind. So, like I said, the scientists didn't agree, so he had to leave from amongst them, from what they call civilization, and he went down into the jungles and began living a jungle life. So, with that being said, the scientists live in a certain type of lifestyle, right? And thinking particular thoughts and eating a particular diet, it began to change us. And this change that we went through as a people had pros and cons. So today, that's my goal, is to touch upon the pros and cons of this story, because often when this subject is discussed, it's usually discussed one-sided. Like either we're all against Shabazz, we we feel that he's a rebel, and maybe it's all negative or no good, or we just focus on the good of Shabazz and we just highlight that he's the God tribe of Shabazz, and that he's indestructible, and that he prepared us to endure what will come up in our future. But the Holy Quran says, take the middle ground. Like, the middle ground is the best place to be in terms of uncovering truth. So that's what I want to do today, is touch on both. So some of the things that we could see right away was that us getting closer to nature. The pros about that, in my opinion, right, mind you, in my opinion, is that we begin to learn the environment around us, right? So oftentimes when you hear about different tribes, you hear about these medicine men in these different villages. Medicine men, I guess the equivalent would be a doctor of today. But sometimes they use that term. But these people specialize in the herbs and plants of the environment. So even when we hear stories of slavery, right? When we hear stories of slavery, of the Atlantic slave trade here in the United States, we talk about, they say sometimes how the master would get sick. He would be sick and he wouldn't really be able to take care of himself or his wife or what have you. But they often say, like, the slave would go into the forest, right? Go into the woods and get plants, medicinal plants, to come back and heal the master or heal themselves. They had this ability, is they had this knowledge, and I believe it's because they became one with their environment, and knowing the nature of the land and how it relates to the human anatomy and the human psyche. And so that was one way that we got close to nature. Also, the story goes, we wanted to conquer the beast there, tame the beast. So we see that as well. Like, Africa has a very, very diverse and large zoology, all type of animals and creatures there. And we did conquer them. As a matter of fact, you hear of, in Africa, we domesticating animals, and being some of the very first to create agriculture and things of that nature there. And we use the beast to do this. We also see in our ancient studies that we study the animal, and you can see that in different records. Like, sometimes when you go to Egypt, you can see that on the walls they will depict certain animals and the characteristics of this animal. So to me, these are the pros. These are the pros because as we study nature and that around us, it gives us an idea and a better and a deeper picture of ourselves, as human beings, and also of God, because God himself designed these animals and designed the nature around us. So if we study these things, we will get a better idea of God and also of ourselves. So that's the pros of the situation. To me, there is also a con that go along with that, a negative aspect of it. And like I said earlier, when we don't establish balance, that's when you see the negative effect of Shabazz and this jungle lifestyle. So for instance, what I said earlier is Shabazz took his family into the jungle, so he strayed away from civilizations. That's what our lessons tell us, that the people on that continent strayed away from civilization. So that implies several things. For one, it says that he moved away from the centers of society. A center meaning a civilization where life was cultivated and a city was established, everything, right? So it says he moved away, went into the jungles, but that also applies the knowledge of God. Because in our lessons, civilization is one having knowledge, wisdom, understanding, refinement, and is not savage, right? Pursuit of happiness. So it's saying that we went away from the knowledge that we originally had of God and of ourselves, right? Is at one time we knew we had a deeper connection of what God was in terms of our origin. But as we went into the jungles, we go away from what we grew up to be prior to living that lifestyle. So we begin to make up our own ideas of God. So we see this in certain cultures. As a matter of fact, I was reading my brother Abdul Allah. He shared a paper with me, and it spoke about the Zulu people, and it said of their god. I think it's how you say it, Unkun Kulo Kun. I think I'm saying that right. And that's the god of the Zulu people. And it says at one time that God was amongst the people, like, you know, he was amongst the people, and then at a certain point, they say, like, you know, he went to the sky, you know, and they began to do, like, reason we know that he was a person at one time because he's a part of their ancestral worship, which means he's an ancestor, a relative, a distant relative. But then you begin to have like the idea of God being in the sky, like a mystery God. But initially, he was, you know what I mean, a person as them. So we see that in different centers of Africa, different centers of civilization. So when you look at Egypt, they have anthropomorphic gods there. You know, when they talk about Amen Ra or Ptah, you know, or Bes, like these different figures are anthropomorphic. Some people say that they just did that to give us an idea of God and how it relates to us, but they're not real people. Some Egyptologists say this, or chematologists say that they're not actually people, that they're like faculties of the mind or just aspects of nature itself. But as we say, they are anthropomorphic or in the form of a man, right? But what have you is you see some of the tribes become animist, and animist is like the worship of animals. You see, so it's one thing to study the nature of an animal to see how it relates and applies to human beings. It's a whole nother thing to begin worshiping animals. You know, so to me, that's the con. Is when you begin to worship that which is not worthy of your worship. You know, which is animals, because of course on the food chain we're above animals. So it's like, why would we worship something beneath us, something that we control, something that we tame, you know, put into labor for ourselves, you know, whether it's an oxen, a donkey, or whatever have you, you know. So to me, those are some of the cons in terms of the jungle life that we begin to lead, we begin to live. Um, so we also getting close to nature like that. We begin to eat certain things that we shouldn't, you know, whether that's tree bark and or nuts and things of that nature that may be against our health, or forbidden animals, you know, whether that's swine or you know other creatures, you know, that may run through the jungle or the forest that, you know, is not good for human consumption. So these are the pros and cons in terms of our people and the lifestyle we begin to live there in the jungles. So one of the things though in my studies and reading um, different publications, like for instance, in Dr. Wesley's work, he talked about the centers of civilization. Um, and to me, what that implies is some of our civilizations, they began to build cities, you know, and not particularly confined to jungle life or huts or primitive huts. Like they begin to build complex structures and stuff like that, and homes and cities, and they would expand and draw more and more people and draw more and more knowledge and spirituality. So those people were not living the jungle life. So sometimes when we say we went to to the jungles, we just think everyone that lived on the continent of Africa strayed away from civilization, and therefore they was living savage, But the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad doesn't say that all of the people there were savage. As a matter of fact, he says the devil wants our people to think that they are all savage, you know, but which implies they're not all savage. Some are, but there are some that's highly civilized and highly educated. And he will also make these statements in Fall of America too. He talked about that when we were taken into slavery, that the white man took some that he said most were uneducated. He said most were uneducated, but there were some that was highly educated that the white man took from Africa and brought to America to build his new world or what have you. So the centers demonstrate that to me, whether that civilization is in Ethiopia, Nubia, right, or Kemet, we can see that they actually built these highly complex structures, as opposed to some that's, like I said, living the jungle life amongst huts and mud huts, using dung from an animal to be the roof and things of this nature, which uh, is low life, I should say, in terms of technology, right? So that's the thing in terms of civilization. Like, not only did we stray away from the bigger cities, right, and we also strayed away from our original way of life, being in tune with God and high science, but civilization also implies technology, right? When you look up civilization, that's one of the words associated with it is technology. So when you live in a jungle life, you're not really focused on technology, and we see that by the simple lifestyles that some of them live. Very simple, very meager, So the cons, like I said, the pros to that is, I guess you're not caught up in the hustle and bustle of greed and things of that nature, but you're also not making progress in terms of a people or a society. You're just being simple. But when you deal with civilization, you always want to be progressive and make progress. And that implies technology, that implies inventions, right? To make life easier for you, to make life better for you, So things that you invent will save you time and you can have time to work on other things, with inventions, It's a simple thing like you look at the turn of the century, how people used to wash their clothes. Sometimes you see old films and they have women depicting them with the silver pans and the washboard and washing their clothes like that, or even more primitive, you see them with washing it on the rocks and hitting the rocks to try to wash it, which was very time consuming and put forth a lot of effort, to where some begin to invent things to make it easier. Now today we have a washing machine to do that for you. So, like I said, it is pros and cons to everything, right? So, and of course, this is in my mind now. This story, so not the story itself, but some of the details in terms of the pros and cons of jungle life. Um, so that's one of the things that we see us moving further and further away from civilization. So that's also reflected in our worship. Like I said, as a some worshiping animals, and different things like that, and being carried away by it instead of just taking the wisdom out of how these different animals and insects may function, and then we take the best out of that and apply it to our lives. It seems like, we go overboard and worship them as if they're real deities and real gods and stuff like that. And, we begin to have these distorted ideas of God and ourselves, right? So, what we spoke of earlier, we see distortion, right? So one of the controversial matters of Shabazz is the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that because we begin to live this jungle lifestyle, that our features begin to change. And what he said was, originally when we was in the area of the Holy Land, which is Arabia, right, and those places like that, that he says that we had straighter hair. Our hair was straighter, not kinky like it is now. And he said our noses was thinner. Um, it wasn't, I guess as broad, and our lips were thinner. Pardon me. Our nose wasn't as broad, and our lips were thinner. But when we begin to live this lifestyle, our features begin to change. So what he said was that the only sign that this was so at one time was our eyebrows. He says that no matter how kinky your hair get, your eyebrows always stay sort of straight. So he said that was a sign of what we once were. So the controversial point of this is that us being in white supremacy for all of these years and taught to hate ourselves and hate our features, sometimes it could get confused with that. It could get confused with Elijah Muhammad saying that we don't love our features. And that's just untrue. Is when you look at our Savior has arrived, the direct quote, the messenger said that we love our woolly hair and our features. He said the future ruler will have woolly hair. That's one of the quotes that he said. So, mind you, we love our kinks. We love it because that's all we know. That's all we know. And you must love yourself regardless to what form you're in, what shape or whatever the case may be. It's always healthy to love yourself, right? So we do. But that doesn't mean that the change that we went through was not real. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that it didn't occur or what have you. So like I was saying earlier, there are always pros and cons, right? So we grew up, those of us that grew up in this age, like me, I'm born in the 70s, so I'm right there on the heels of the Black Power movement and love blackness. So I grew up like that. Once we came of age in the 80s, and learning of hip hop about how to love yourself and to know yourself. So our generation grew up with that in mind, that black is beautiful or what have you. But like I said, there are pros and cons. Even though I liked our hairstyles, like we came up with the high top fade, with the afro, like things that are relative to the kink, and that gave us power and self identity. These things, were great for that time period, and they still are great. But those are the pros. But there are cons too. Like we only look at that aspect of it, but those that have kinky hair and you may have a beard, like I say, you grow facial hair, like because our hair curls like that and kinks, it sometimes grows within the skin and it cause you to get razor bumps if you shave with a razor or what have you beneath the skin. And it could cause you to have bumps, all over your face or on your head, and different things. That is a con of it. You see what I'm saying? So we just focus on the Black Power part because, that's a great healing to our damaged psyche from self-hatred of slavery, which is good, But in truth, there are cons to it too, as I just explained. That part right there is difficult. And it's also difficult too if you tender headed. You know what I mean? We don't really talk about that, but anybody that has sisters or little cousins or something, niece that's tender headed, they go through great pain by taking care, grooming their hair, stuff, combing it or what have you. So there are cons to things too. But like I said, our people are so highly sensitive, like we can never talk about it without it offending, because we're under such oppression in terms of how we look and who we are as a people. But amongst ourselves, I don't think we should go down that road, especially coming from someone like the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who is the foremost catalyst of loving self and doing for self. He's the one who taught us to be proud of black. You see, so we shouldn't get so sensitive to where we can't reason and the subject is beyond reason, because our greats taught the same history, right? Which is Malcolm X taught this history, Khalid Abdul Muhammad taught this history, but it just seems like when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teaches this history, everyone gets up in arms and, oh he teaching self-hatred, and he's not. What he said was that he said that when you rebel against God, it shows up in your features. It shows up in your features, and or it goes to the skin or the top of your skin or what have you when you rebel a certain lifestyle. So that sounds like a little crazy, but when we think about it and we look at certain effects around us, we could kind of see that, right? Like okay, for example, sometimes you will hear sisters talk about men that just come home from jail, right? And they be like, "Oh, when you come home from jail, you got that look, that jail glow on you." They talk like that because you on a certain regimen, a lifestyle. You eating only 3 times a day. You getting a lot of rest. You getting a lot of rest in there, and you don't have the hustle and bustle of being out in the free world. Especially if you drugging or getting high in there, you may not have that opportunity to be getting high and running to and fro. So it begins to show up in your skin. It begins to show up in your eyes, like they're clearer. Your eyes look clearer. Your skin look clearer. You know what I mean? You have that glow. So that's just one aspect of it. You also see this too with members of the nation from living the dietary law and thinking the right thoughts, positive thoughts. And it shows up, what I mean? It shows up, in the surface of you. So, thought, how we say the popular saying is mind over matter, you see, or mind shapes matter, you see? And that's one of the things that we can see, from the thinking, the power of thinking, and that also happens sometimes too from, a feminine and masculine standpoint, to where you can have a man who's in his thinking, he feels that he's a woman or that he was supposed to be born a woman. From that thought, to show you how powerful a thought is, sometimes he'll start taking on feminine characteristics, in his face or what have you, And the same thing, vice versa, with a woman who feel that, she was supposed to be born a man. She would sometimes take on masculine qualities. Her face. It's just showing the power of thought and how it affects matter or what have you. So, that's really what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was speaking about in terms of our features and how it affects the physical. Now, one of the ways to me that we can see that is how we start to mutilate ourselves in Africa, the tribes, to whether it's cutting our face, putting cuts all over us, or whether it's slipping a disc in your lips or elongating your neck, it's just self-mutilation. Self-mutilation is like, that type of, whatever you doing that to the surface, it stems from a thought from within. You see what I'm saying? There's something about, like, you don't like the way you look naturally, so you begin to modify yourself. You see? So, and we see that today in today's society. That's nothing to raise an eyebrow about. You see that sometimes with people with tats all over their body. You get some people that even put horns, beneath their skin to make them have the appearance that they got devil's horns or animal horns or whatever have you. Like, self-mutilation, but that comes from a thought, from a thinking. So, in my mind, these are not natural things, and this can only come about from when you stray away from civilization, which means you stray away from God. So that's reflected, and that was the controversial aspect, or I should say the most controversial aspect of the tribe of Shabazz and the lifestyle. Now, like I said, um, there were the pros, and the pros is that we became the most strongest, toughest, durable people on the face of the planet, from Shabazz doing this. So even though Shabazz rebelled against the other 11 scientists, some people don't like that word when you say rebelled, but in truth, what else could we classify that when we talk about straying away from civilization? And civilization is the key. Like, that's what we looking for, because civilization leads you to the science of everything in life. So if you going away from that, like, God don't want us to go stray away from him and his way. Like, the whole goal and aim of society is for us to become, righteous within our being, so that we'll create a world of righteousness, not a world of turmoil and hatred and death and murder and disease. Like, that's not the goal. Who would want that for themselves or their family? So naturally, that's the goal, right? So we don't want to stray away from that. So, but like I said, there was pros to it, and we became the strongest people alive. So, what we see is, during slavery, the European, he tried to enslave his own at first, right? He tried to enslave Europeans and put them under that heavy labor, and they couldn't take it. Of course, they would die, collapse, become diseased, or whatever have you. They just couldn't endure that type of labor. So then he tried to do it with the Native American or the Indian, whatever you want to address them as. He tried to do it with them, and the same thing. They couldn't take that type of oppression on them, and they would die out, become sickly, and they just couldn't bear that burden, But they say one of the slave traders, John Hawkins, said he knew of a people that could withstand it, and that they were great people, and that's when he reached over into Africa and got us and brung us and put us in the Atlantic slave trade and the life of slavery and enslavement and oppression. But that's the proof of what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught in terms of us being the strongest people on earth. So, in that sense, Shabazz, or the scientist, his name is not necessarily Shabazz, but he is from the tribe of Shabazz. But he was right on it, dead on it in terms of that, because, as you see, we survived it. We survived the most turbulent, oppressive conditions the world has ever known, and we still here. And, not only did we survive it, but in certain instances, we thrived in it. We were still able to populate and make babies under those conditions. You would think with that type of oppression and misery going on that it would do something to the birth rate, but in many instances we were still multiplying, you know, despite the fact that they was hanging us, drowning us in rivers, letting dogs mutilate us and, rip us apart. We still was thriving. And not only that, we were making inventions and everything under those circumstances. So I think that proved that we were the smartest, and it also proves that that we were the toughest and to endure. So those were the pros of the situation. Like I said, there are cons as well. So we kind of doing this dance back and forth. So the other thing was about the tribe of Shabazz to me that was a con was the fact that we went into tribalism. You know what I mean? And tribalism is a good thing in one sense because it's like a bond that brings a particular people together under a particular set of circumstances, right? So when they experience this, whatever it may be, this occurrence or way of living, it bonds them together as a specific people that went through this, and it's fused in their DNA, right? So tribes are a good thing. They're a real thing. They're a natural thing that happens. But the problem with tribalism is when you try to raise the tribe above nation, when you think your tribe is more important than nation, and the goal of life is to become a nation. That's the whole goal, is to rise above tribalism. Some of us don't get that, and we make that the goal and the badge of honor. But the goal of the Nation of Islam is for us to be a nation without borders. You see, without borders. And the nation, the commonality that will unite us all is the righteousness. You see what I'm saying? No matter what land or region or people that you are, the righteousness is what will connect you into nationhood, and we will identify each other as brother and sister beyond the complexion of our skin, the phenotype that we might have, or what have you. Like that will bond us together, and that's the goal: is to make a paradise on earth of people that's for righteousness. You see, so but sometimes, like I said, when you get into the whole tribal thing, is you think that your tribe is more important than righteousness, and you begin to have entitlement, or you feel that you may could dominate this other tribe, or at one time the tribe may have dominated you, and you want some revenge or vengeance or what have you. But either way, all of that is against civilization and growth and development and progress. And we see that manifested throughout the continent of Africa, and that's, to me, how the white man was able to come in amongst that giant continent of people and take it over. Because mind you, the white man is a minority on earth. And he went in there separately as countries. He didn't go in there as Europe. What I mean by that is the Portuguese didn't team up with the Spaniards and then team up with the Italians and the Romans and or whatever, and then go into Africa and conquer. Like, no, they went in there individually. As Portuguese went by themselves, the Spanish went in there by themselves, you see, and they conquered. The English went in there and they took over. They was able to divide and conquer because they were already divided. You see what I'm saying? The tribes were already divided because they were more interested in tribes than uniting against a common enemy, in many instances. So that's the con in terms of the tribe of Shabazz and everything. Not that there's something wrong with a tribe in particular. There's not, because it's natural. You're just going to have certain experiences that make you who you are, but you just can't rise it above nationhood and the righteousness, of our nature or what have you. So, those, like I said, those are some of the cons of it. Um, the tribe of Shabazz, is the God tribe, though. We are the God tribe in terms of the tribe that keeps history, the tribe that raises messengers and prophets from amongst the people. Like, that's the tribe in command of that. Meaning, like what I spoke of earlier, is the 12, or it's 24 of them, 12 major, 12 minor. Like, they're in charge of that writing, and they're in charge of the righteousness and even the evil that spreads. Not that they themselves commit evil, but they allow evil to spread on the earth for a specific purpose or a specific effect, that will eventually be for good. So that may sound crazy, but that's kind of what we've been touching upon this whole episode. The pros and the cons. Like, meaning the scientists were against us straying away from civilization because they know that was going to cause us to stray away from God and our original way of life. But it did make us, durable, and we withstood slavery due to this jungle lifestyle. You see, so like I said, the scientist, that took it, we consider him our father because we kind of take after him going into these jungles and living his life. So he was on it. He had pros and cons. Like he rebelled against the other 11, but he felt it necessary for us to go through whatever he saw we was gonna go through. And he was on it. He was on it, but we did get lost, and that's the thing. Um, One of the names for the Nation of Islam here is the Lord. We are the lost found nation of Asia, right? We use that term, or sometimes we would say, or the lost tribe of Shabazz, because we got lost, not just from the 400 years ago, but we also got lost from, because this occurred, like I said, 50,000 years ago, right? Which is two 25,000 year cycles. We were away from our original way of life, and that's what you see in terms of this jungle life. And that's to me what led to us elongating our necks and slitting disc in our earlobes, slitting bones in our noses and in our disc, and stretching our lips out to the size of a china plate, which some people feel is beautiful. Like they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like we can make ourselves get used to anything in life and see beauty in it. You see, that depends on the person, but to me, it's still stray away from civilization. You see what I'm saying? It's still savagery compared to your normal natural self. You know, in terms of scarring and disfiguring yourself. You know, so like I said, this was a hard talk in terms of that. Like not wanting to intentionally offend people. Some of course will be offended, but it's not done with that malice or malicious intent. We just teaching on the history and trying to look at it from a mature point of view. So in the comments, if you want to write write your understanding of it or how you see it, your viewpoint, I welcome you to do so. We could chop it up in the comment section and go over it. But like what I would like to say is that some people jumped on the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan for saying that we strayed away from civilization and rebellion to Allah, and that it was ugly behavior that manifested in our features. But what we can see from the writings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad is that he did not like jungle life. He wrote about it in The Fall of America, and I believe also it's a paragraph in Our Savior Has Arrived. I believe no, I'm sorry, that is in The Fall of America, and he talked about it. And one instance he said he didn't like that they weren't grooming themselves. They didn't use barber shears, and he didn't like that look of not being groomed. And he said this came about through jungle life. And he also talked about in the Theology of Time, the lecture series, that because mind you, this was the 60s and 70s, so a lot of Black Power movements was formulating and pushing the curriculum on the college level and also the high schools and stuff. They was pushing that back to Africa type of teaching. So the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was saying that we reaching back to Africa, but we're going and studying jungle life, and we're highlighting that and applauding it. And he was saying like that's not the way. That some of Africa have some high civilization and education, but those that's living the jungle life, he was saying is he didn't use the word progressive. It's not progressive, but that was the gist of it in terms of my understanding of what he was saying, is that we shouldn't celebrate that aspect of Africa. He says that some of them have their own ancient traditions, which is good, but he's also said the European mixed in his way amongst them too, which is the tricknology or deception in terms of spirituality or history or what have you. And he said that some of our people on that continent was lost in that way, and that we should bring our way of life, what we learn from God in person, to there. And this is a perfect civilizing education that we have here in the Nation of Islam, and that we should celebrate that and not grab onto some of their old ways, especially their ways that's backwards or that's counterproductive to a natural way of life, what have you. So the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad wrote of his disdain for jungle life, and even in the lessons he speak about that, where he said we strayed away from civilization. And he also said that the devil calls our people African because he wants us to think that they're the only people that we have, just there in the jungles, right? So he's trying to tell us that no, we have people all over around the earth. Our people in Arabia, our people in Afghanistan, our people in Iraq, people in Iran, like all there in that holy region is our people. Even going up into the Indus Valley is our people. And they have their own history of straying away from civilization as well, where they was exile. We'll go into that in another show, another time. But we could see from reading that the messenger was definitely dissatisfied with jungle life, and it's not something that he celebrated. It's not something that he was big on, And sometimes he would use that term, like the savage pygmy. Like he would use that term because he didn't like the fact that certain tribes don't dress, like certain tribes go nude or half nude. He says, that's uncivilized in a civilized world to be unclothed and naked. That we should have dignity and pride in dressing ourselves and keeping our parts private, instead of between a husband and a wife, and not for any Joe Schmo to see and look upon you in that way. That may create lust or what have you. So again, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is following in the footsteps of his teacher 1000%, as always. And the minister spoke about a conversation he had with the messenger about that in private, and he documents this in the book Closing the Gap. He talks about how he was upset with the scientists, the 24 scientists, of how they led us stray for 50,000 years without sending us someone to put us on the path. So he wrote a letter to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, when he saw him in purpose, told him not to write a letter like that with such high wisdom and send it through mail it to him, because he said his secretaries read his mail, and if they open and read that, they might can't handle the high wisdom that the minister displayed in it, and it may affect their faith. So he said, put a letter like that in my hand. But the messenger went on to tell him that God didn't send us out there. Like Shabazz, or not Shabazz, but the scientist, he himself decided to go. They advised him against it, but he decided he wanted to go. And that was some of the cons that would come along with the pros, is that we would be lost for those 50,000 years, away from civilization. So the messenger used the language in that instance, that conversation, of rebel. He said he rebelled against them, and we covered that in terms of straying. Now, that doesn't mean that every single person on the continent was like that, because like I said, society has an ebb and flow. You're up and you're down, and we see that with the centers of civilization in Africa. But if you notice, that's what we highlight as a people. We only highlight the centers, right? Like we study, whether it's Nubia, right, or Kemet, right, or is a civilization in Zimbabwe that they found a stone civilization, right? Whether it's the Songhai Empire, the Mali Empire, right? These are all empires, and these are all civilizations that built up. We don't necessarily celebrate, those living a jungle life that's like unproductive. You know, it's just not natural. And the same thing around the planet. You highlight the Aztecs, highlight the Incas, like people that built the civilization, not necessarily living a primitive jungle life. You see? So these are like the pros and cons that we talked about. I hope I did the subject justice and was fair. You know, it wasn't meant to what's the word, to concentrate on the negative aspects alone. It wasn't meant to concentrate fully on the positive or the pros of the situation. I wanted to create some balance to show that it had both. And we see all of these things about our Father manifested in us today. And you have a lot of tribalism, here with us here in America in terms of why we can't unite. You see the same thing going over there in Africa with the different countries and stuff there and the different tribes. Like they won't unite. And that same thing is manifested with blacks in the diaspora of Africa here. We find everything to be divided over, whether it's consciousness, whether it's gang life, whether it's, East Coast, West Coast, down South, Midwest. Like we just find reasons to be divided and to go further into this tribal mentality, and it's really the death of us, and it's really stopping us from furthering and advancing ourselves as a people. And the powers that be know this, and they manipulate this amongst us, so these are the things that, when we read that story of Shabazz, we can learn from it, and ask ourselves, are we manifesting jungle lifestyle, in our thinking? Are we being too tribal? Are we being too spooky, about God and spiritual things? When we say spooky, we mean unrealistic thoughts that we may develop of God and devil. Thoughts that's not grounded in reality, but just from our imagination, and then we form a culture from it. You see, and that's what happens in religion. And it happens in all religions. On earth. We begin to gather these spooky ideas when we misinterpret God's word, or sometimes intentionally inject it into religion and culture, because it's about control, So these things that we have to ask one another in terms of us, are we living a jungle life? And if we are, how can we get back to civilization? How can we get back to the way of God? On the right course, on the right path. So, I hope this was a enlightening talk of somewhat. Not we could chop it up, in the comment section. As I said in the beginning, if you're watching this in Facebook, one of the social media platforms, open up the browser and go on YouTube and like and comment. I want to push this my page up to 100 subscribers. 100 subscribers. I'll rename the channel and make it easier to be found by those searching for knowledge. So just like that like button and comment, and share the video. And we'll take this journey together and learn together, right? So may Allah bless us all with the light of understanding. And I'll see you next time. Assalamu alaikum. Help grow the channel by hitting that like and subscribe button. Leave a comment and share.